You have to start actually enjoying what you're doing. You don't have to be good at it. You don't need to essentially be knowing what you're doing at the beginning, but you have to enjoy the process. I've always loved my entire life just having conversations with cool, interesting people who I admired. Mumbai, Amritsar, Varanasi. I mean, I traveled your entire country. I've never eaten better food in my life. I never will. It's just the best food in the world. And I love everything about India. I even was in a Bollywood movie called Yuvraj, and I got to kiss Katrina Kaif.
That's awesome,
It was
actually.
pretty awesome.
Because Katrina Kaif is a crush of every Indian. Like you saying this, people are
Me
like,
too.
"Oh my, oh wow, this is awesome." So, John, just a question. Okay, like this question, like you have built such a big podcast over the years. What is the secret sauce behind that?
The secret sauce is this: if you're going to create a successful anything, podcast, product, service, business, whatever it might be, you need to be able to look in the mirror and say, I have created the number one solution to a real problem. The number one solution to not just any problem, but a real problem in this world. That's the goal. And so with Entrepreneurs on Fire, it's 11 years old. So listen, 11 years ago, I launched the first daily podcast interviewing entrepreneurs called Entrepreneurs on Fire. The first daily podcast interviewing entrepreneurs. Now, what does that mean? It means the day that I launched Entrepreneurs on Fire was the best daily podcast interviewing entrepreneurs. It was the worst daily podcast interviewing entrepreneurs. It was the only daily podcast interviewing entrepreneurs. So I was providing the number one solution to a real problem in this world. And a real problem was there were a lot of people out there that wanted to wake up every morning and as they drove to work, listen to an interview with a successful entrepreneur and be inspired, be motivated, learn valuable things. They wanted that. And I created the number one solution. Now, again, it was the only solution, which made it the number one of one solution. It was the only game in town. And 11 years later, Entrepreneurs on Fire is the only daily podcast interviewing entrepreneurs. It's still a category of one. So, what can you do to create a category of one?
Just a question, John. Like, how did it all get started? Like, when did you get the idea that you want to help the entrepreneurs on fire? You want to create. Like, what was the epiphany behind it?
Like almost how every good idea begins. I was scratching my own itch. I said the words, I want to listen to a daily podcast interviewing the world's most successful entrepreneurs. I wanted to have that show in my phone. I went to search for that show in Apple and Spotify, wherever. The show did not exist. It didn't exist. And I said, if this show does not exist, I can create that show. I can fill the void that currently exists for something I know needs to exist. Like I'm sure you've watched the movie Yesterday. Do you remember that movie Yesterday where the guy wakes up and nobody had ever heard of the Beatles? Nobody had ever heard of a number of things that you and I have heard of because they're very important, famous, popular things. But for some reason, in this movie, those things were just no longer in people's memory. They never existed because he was in a parallel universe. So what did he do? He became very rich and wealthy, just creating those things because he knew that they were home runs just waiting to be created because in his other parallel life, those things were huge. And that was my kind of realization of like, wow, I can't believe this doesn't exist. Like it's shocking to me. I'm going to create it. To me, it's a no brainer.
That's amazing. So one question. So like with the years coming in, your podcast is one of the best podcasts right now, the Entrepreneurs on Fire. Now, my question to you here is this: when you started the journey, it was not the same. It was like you sometimes you got 2 views, sometimes you got 5 views at the start. Slowly it scaled to like millions of views. My question to you here: most of the people lose their motivation on the first. How to be motivated for 11 years? How did you keep the motivation going on?
You have to start actually enjoying what you're doing. You don't have to be good at it. You don't need to essentially be knowing what you're doing at the beginning, but you have to enjoy the process. I've always loved my entire life just having conversations with cool, interesting people who I admired. And the fact that I was now able to do that on a bigger level because now individuals would come on my show because I had, a small audience, but at least I had some kind of platform was just really exciting to me. It was really something that I said, wow, I get to do what I already enjoy doing, which is having cool conversations with cool people. And I get to do that every day. Like that's something I just enjoy doing. That's something that I would want to do whether I was making millions of dollars or $0. I want to wake up and I want to have a cool conversation with a cool person. That's something that I get excited about. Not everybody gets excited about that. Just like I don't get excited about certain things that people wake up and are excited to do. And then they go off and make millions of dollars doing those things because they're excited about it, not me. So I just love the process. And, I just don't want to stop it. Like I really, really love having these conversations. And so for me, having 365 of these conversations a year is really enjoyable. And the thought of not doing that, it's like, well, what would I do instead? And I'm not really sure.
It's amazing. Just one question, like this name, Entrepreneurs on Fire, is so unique. Like, how did that name came up? Any story behind that?
So there is a story. So in the United States, we have this sports channel that's called Sports Center. Now, Sports Center, they play all the highlights of that day of sports, basketball, soccer, cricket. I threw cricket in there because I know you guys, you love cricket.
We
It,
love it.
I know.
You
I,
got so
I
you actually
I played cricket in Mumbai. It was a lot of fun. It was a lot of fun. And so
actually you look like AB de Villiers a bit. You look
I
like
what?
AB de Villiers. You look like AB de Villiers, the South African cricketer. You look
Oh,
like him a bit.
that's funny. I'll have to Google him after this interview. So, um, I was listening to Sports Center, or I was watching Sports Center on TV, and I was actually folding some socks after doing some laundry. And the guy was talking about one of our most famous basketball players, LeBron James. And LeBron James just kept making 3-point shots, 3-point shot, 3-point shot, 3-point shot. And so we have a saying in the United States, and it's kind of an international saying as well, which is like when you can't miss, when you're crushing it, you are on fire. You're on fire. You can't miss. You're untouchable. And so the announcer goes, LeBron James, he's on fire. And I said, wait a second. I know I want the word entrepreneurs in my podcast title because that's what I'm going to be doing. I'm going to be interviewing entrepreneurs, but I can't just have the name entrepreneurs or interviews entrepreneurs. That's kind of a boring name. So I was looking for something kind of clever and cool that people would understand. And so to me, On Fire just clicked. Entrepreneurs on Fire. And I said, that's it. That's the name. I went to the internet and I, went and checked if the domain was available. I'm like, oh my God, the domain's available. And I bought it right away. And I was like, that's it. That's the name.
That's amazing. Like that's a very cool story actually. So my next question to you is that over the years you have learned a lot of things. What are the 5 key takeaways of any person to build and grow a podcast?
I'm going to talk about 3 things first. Number 1 is productivity. You have to be productive on a daily basis. Now, a lot of people think they're productive, they're just busy. And being busy is not being productive. Being productive is producing the right content. So for me, being productive is interviewing entrepreneurs who are on fire. That's me being productive. Anything else, I'm not really being productive. And in fact, I should probably have one of my assistants doing that thing because I need to be productive, producing, the right content. That's what I need to do. Number two, you have to be disciplined. There needs to be that level of discipline. And for me, you need to break down the word discipline to disciple. And that means you have a plan of action every day and you are a disciple in executing that plan. You are disciplined to your core that when you wake up in the morning, you have that plan and you complete that plan by the end of the day. It doesn't have to be a million things, but there has to be certain things that you know are moving your business forward that you're accomplishing every day. And then the third thing is focus. You need to have one focus. That's why focus, if you break it down into an acronym, FOCUS, follow one course until success. That's what focus means. Follow one course until success. Don't be doing 5 different things because you're going to do 5 things average. Nobody wants average. Do one thing elite at an elite level. And then, for number 4 and number 5, consistency and persistence. Wake up every day consistently and get going on those things that you need to get going on. And then the persistence, I've been doing this for 11 years now. I could have given up after 6 months and nobody would have known or even cared. I could have given up after 6 years and I would have done very well, but people would have forgotten over time what I built. But I've been persistent now for 11 years. I've showed up every day and I've persisted and I've outlasted everybody that's tried to take my throne of being a daily podcast interviewing entrepreneurs because I'm persistent.
So we have a question from Caroline from India. She's asking like that. So how do you go ahead and select the entrepreneurs whom you want to have in your show? Do you have some kind of criteria, or means how do you reach out like
Yeah.
this?
So now we get about 2 million listens of our podcast per month. So it's a very big platform. Because of that, we get about 400 to 600 inquiries per month of people who are requesting to be on the show. From that big batch of people, we put them through a pretty detailed application process where they need to tell us who they are, what they do, what they want to talk about on the show, the value they're going to bring on the show, why they're the right person to bring the value to my audience. And then my team whittles that down. And then from that whittled down number, I select the right guest based off of the topic and the individual. And in fact, I jump on a video call with every prospective guest before we accept them on the show, just to make sure they have the right energy, the right vibe, and the topic is really the right topic. So we spend so much time before we even select somebody to be on the show.
That's amazing, actually. That's so detailed analysis. So Rama Sangli from India has this question that how do you plan a script? Means a podcasting is all about having the proper script. So how do you plan the script?
You can't overplan the script because at the end of the day, it's a conversation that you're having. And that's why podcasters get better with age. I was not able to do this years 1, 2, and 3 of my show, but now that I've been doing this for 11 years for 4,000 episodes, I have a talent. I have a skill that I didn't have when I started. So that's why you've got to keep putting in the reps, keep practicing to get better and better and better. At the end of the day, what you need to be focused on is, are your listeners getting the most value that they can from that guest that's on the show? And the answer is yes, if you're asking that guest the right questions that is hitting on their specific areas of expertise, their knowledge, their skills. So I don't ask questions to my guests that they don't really know much about, because I don't care about their answers to those things. I don't want average answers to things they don't really know anything about. I want great elite answers on topics that they are an elite individual on. So that's the focus, and that's what we bring to the table.
That's amazing. So I respect your time. I will ask just the last one question, if that's okay with you.
Let's do it.
Okay. So one question, like most of the people in India. So as you know that India is a very growing market right now.
Big
So
time.
most of the people in India, they want to start a podcast, and but they always get confused how to start. If you can just say some points like how people in India can start a podcast easily, then that would help them a lot.
Listen, I have the best answer in the world. I have a completely free podcasting course that you can go and for 100% free, take my free podcast course. It's
So
free.
can you just say the link, because right now 500
Yep.
people is live. I can drop it on the spot.
Yeah, drop it right there in the chat. It's freepodcastcourse.com. Freepodcastcourse.com. It's completely free, and it will take you through how to create your podcast and how to launch your podcast. So everything you need, from idea to understanding what it means to launch a podcast and everything in between. And it's all for free, because I want you to share your voice, your message, your mission with the world, because more people like us doing these things, it makes the world a better place. So check it out, freepodcastcourse.com. That's my gift to everybody in your audience.
Absolutely. I think they all have started going and registering it right now.
Boom.
So uh, thank you, John, for coming on this podcast. Just one last question. What's your favorite Indian food?
Man, I mean, listen, I love everything about Indian food. I will say my favorite place in India that I ate was in Kerala. For some reason, I loved the food that was down there and at that southern tip of the country. Just amazing. But really anything masala. Like, I just love that flavor. To me, it's just anything that has that.
So one lady out here, she just said that, John, next time you are here in Kerala, please have food at my home.
She's in Kerala. Amazing. I love that area. It's beautiful. It's, again, one of the many, many places I visited in India. But for some reason, the food down there was just like, I mean, the food in the entire country was amazing, but the meals I had down there were just next level.
Thank you, John. So all right, thank you, John, for your time, and it was amazing having you. John, one